Welcome to Legal Innovation Spotlight, the podcast that brings you the latest advancements in legal tech and knowledge management. I'm Ted Theodoropoulos, and I connect with the industry's brightest minds to provide you with valuable insights and actionable takeaways. So sit back, relax, and let's dive in. Katrina Dittmer, how are you today?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
I am good and looking forward to our conversation today, which is a long time coming. You and I worked on a chapter of a book recently on this topic that we're going to talk about today, which is legal collaboration. And we share a lot of philosophies on this.
Indeed.
And I think this is going to be a good conversation. But before we jump in, let's get you introduced for those that don't know you. You've been around for a long time, so like me. In fact, I think seasoned vets. I'm trying to think when you and I met. I think it was at a SharePoint symposium. I know it was more than 10 years ago. I don't know if it was quite 15.
I think it might have been 2013 or 14.
That sounds right.
Only because I remember it was after like the Baker and Daniels and Faegre and Benson merger. Just based on who I was there with.
Yeah, I remember who you were there with. You guys talked about InfoPath.
We did.
Yeah.
It was the best we had at the moment.
I remember.
Without buying a big third-party tool.
Good times. So you started your legal tech career, it looks like, in lit support. You were in KM&I roles at Faegre for many years, and now you're at Eversheds. So
I have to say Eversheds Sutherland.
Okay.
You have the whole name. And I joined the U.S. side of the firm a little over 2 years ago.
Okay, you guys are clients now. Thank you for correcting me. Eversheds Sutherland. I need to say it right.
These firms that are born of combinations. We have to use that right word, right? The names matter.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. And I just realized something. You and I did a webinar way back in the day with ILTA. I think we were talking about. Do you remember this?
No.
Yeah.
I should know of these.
It's still out on YouTube somewhere. I saw it not too long ago.
That's hysterical. What color hair did I have then?
A little different than today.
Sure.
And so was my, I haven't had hair in a long time, but my beard had more color.
Very good.
Yeah, that was a really long time ago, but it's good to do this with you again. And today we're going to talk about legal collaboration. And you have a background in this, and you guys your firm has been kind enough to participate with us in our build out of our solution. And the reason, our motivation for charging down this path, so we started our journey as AcroWire. We built a lot of bespoke Extranet solutions, and we help firms manage the solutions that they already had stood up. And the market was ripe for a different solution and alternative out there. We all know that HiQ dominates the Extranet market, and there's just not been a lot of choice in the marketplace that's legal specific.
Sure.
And it seems to me that, and I don't know if you disagree, if I had to guess, I think you would, but my take is that there hasn't been a ton of innovation in this legal collaboration space in quite a while. The two primary vendors, both internal facing collaboration, i.e. Intranet, and external facing Extranet, got bought by much bigger companies many years ago. And it just doesn't seem like there's been a lot of innovation. Is that your take as well?
Agree-ish. I mean, I see some of the firms and even some of the sites that have been developed with, am I allowed to use the incumbent name?
Yeah.
With HiQ, right? That are really progressive. They push the platform quite a lot. From my vantage point, I would prefer to build to grow capabilities with tools that we already own and are familiar with. And that's Microsoft, right? And I think HiQ made a ton of sense when we were fighting with SharePoint Online, and every time there was a platform upgrade needed, it was a behemoth of a project because you're standing up all new hardware and migrating content and all of those things for not much functionality improvement. So HiQ was fabulous.
Yeah.
As an alternative, but fast forward to SharePoint Online and, Microsoft's cloud journey and investment. And I think we're in a bit different place.
Yeah. The on-prem days were rough, especially when it came to sharing externally. You used to have to stand up a DMZ.
Oh, amen.
And put a web front end out there at a minimum, and you had to muddy up your Active Directory infrastructure with external users, and it was just messy.
Well, and candidly, the UI, the user experience at that time for SharePoint, not spectacular.
Yeah, that's saying it kindly. It's gotten a lot better, and SharePoint Online, Microsoft has really doubled down on M365, and SharePoint Online is now a very mature platform. We started out in the early days, so back when we were consultants and trying to build the business, we said yes to things we should have never said yes to. But you know how it is when you're trying to earn $1. It's yeah, I can do that and figure it out later. I'm glad those days are behind us because that was painful. But we started doing do you remember BPOS? That was the predecessor to Microsoft 365. It was called Business Productivity Online Suite, BPOS for short.
Maybe I had heard of that second reference, but I had not heard of it as the acronym. That does not roll off your tongue.
No. And there was nothing that really made sense in that world. They basically took the on-prem products and tried to make them multi-tenant and hosted, and it was really clumsy and it was really tough. And we moved. So the first big
sounds about as good as Clippy.
Yeah, it was. It was a lot like Clippy. Microsoft's had a lot of those whiffs over the years. But the first viable iteration of Office 365, as it was called back then, now it's just Microsoft 365, was something called Wave 14. And that happened in maybe 2012, maybe 2013. And we moved a massive client. We moved Sunoco, the oil and gas company that's owned by Energy Transfer Partners. It's Fortune 20. They're a massive company. And they picked us to help them move because we had some depth. And man, it was painful. Even as far as things had progressed with Wave 14, it was still really tough. And today it's a lot easier, and it feels like law firms maximizing their investment in M365 just makes a lot of sense from skill set perspective, from consistency perspective, from just limiting the number of vendors and licensing and all of that sort of stuff. It just seems to make a lot of sense to think about that path.
I think there's another part to it that is so many corporate clients sit on top of the M365. That's the ecosystem they work in. They're comfortable with it. Right? It's another, maybe the branding is a little bit different, but in terms of base functionality, it's what they're used to.
Yeah. Well, and back to the thinking about the incumbents and the intranet, extranet space that are legal specific, they were bought by much bigger companies, and, like, focus changes over time. There's a lot of focus on AI on the practice management side, which is where Handshake went, that was the incumbent in the space.
Yeah.
Their practice management is still largely on-prem. So they're very focused, it seems like, moving to the cloud, and, they've got their own AI ambitions as well. But yeah, as focus changes, so sometimes does the investment. And when something becomes misaligned with a strategic direction, it doesn't always keep up.
Well, for sure. And I think when you start considering like other capabilities, other features that you want to be able to present to your clients through an extranet, staying in that platform where your data lives, right? And where you're comfortable doing development, doing integration, it just makes sense. And I can't imagine that, it's not a risky bet, right? I mean, it's where you're spending most of your time and money anyway. And when I think about, you mentioned AI, when I think about the maturity of like Copilot Studio, and we're still in early days, right? I mean, what is this phrase? This is the worst it's ever going to be. Right?
Yeah. Well, and, another, I think, interesting benefit to deploying your solutions in M365 is it's all the ancillary capabilities that Microsoft brings to the table. Azure OpenAI, Azure AI Search, Power Automate, Power BI, Power Apps, like all of that is now accessible when you deploy within that M365 boundary.
Yep. And I think even just some of the core M365 elements, they used to be called SharePoint lists. Right now they're just Microsoft lists. And I can't keep track of all of the name changes, frankly. But all of those other elements that are just available to help you with basic information that might be valuable, relevant in the information that you share and manage with and for your clients. Even before you get to the really cool stuff that you just like, all the Power Platform stuff. You don't even have to necessarily be in that level, although it's there and that's great. But yeah, I just think far more Lego blocks available to you.
Yeah, for sure. And you can also kind of start to center around a common authentication mechanism like Entra, which is a beast. Let's be clear on that. It is a beast, but today you have all these SSO, single sign-on frameworks that are out there that create additional complexity. So centering your strategy in around a common authentication framework, I think, also makes a lot of sense.
It does. And obviously we are still very early in our shift over to the Microsoft environment for extranets. But yes, I'm very much looking forward to that being available for our guests.
Yeah. So when we started Infodash, we had a vision. It took us longer to get here than I thought we would, but for a good reason, because we got so damn busy on the intranet side, because our timing was really good, right? Like all these big firms were moving to the cloud. So we started Infodash in 2022 and kind of started turning off our legacy AcroWire customers. So we'd either migrate them to the platform or just part ways. And we had to do that obviously in an orderly fashion. So that took some time. But 2022 was really, again, I'd rather be lucky than good. And we were very lucky in that our timing lined up perfectly with Big Law's real push to M365. Like some firms had moved messaging already, right?
Yeah.
That's always the first step, is move email, because it just makes so much sense. But then those ancillary M365 workloads like SharePoint, those really started to happen in earnest in 2022, and they're still underway. I'd say, if I had to guess, I would say less than half the AmLaw is in SharePoint Online in earnest, right?
Yeah.
They may have a couple of sites, they're doing some project management stuff, but I still think that less than half are there, full blown, fully committed, turn off the lights on prem. I don't know. Does that sound right to you?
I don't have a great sense of the broader market. I will say, when I was pondering, do I make this shift over to Evershed Sutherland, the fact that they had been in the Microsoft, like in the cloud environment already for several years, meant to me that I likely had fewer barriers, right? In terms of how I thought about some of the challenges I would face and the way I would approach solving them. So I feel badly, I guess, for firms that aren't there yet. I think their ability to innovate they're perhaps a bit handcuffed in that.
Yeah, they are. And it is, I talk to a lot of folks I go to a ton of conferences, hosting on this podcast. We're always engaging with new firms. We've done business with over 110. I stopped counting at 110 AmLaw firms. Now that number is very slightly inflated because back when we were still counting, actually it's probably evened out now because we stopped counting, but like Faegre, Baker Daniels, and Drinker Biddle were both AmLaw clients independently. Then they merged to become, and their clients again as Faegre Drinker. But through all of that perspective that I've been able to get access to, it feels like there are going to be the haves and the have-nots in this like post-Gen AI world, because it seems like there's firms fall into one of two camps. They're either really doubling down and investing in this and moving forward, or it's deer in the headlights. Like they don't know what to do. They're overwhelmed. They've got a couple of POCs going with maybe some Copilot pushed out, but not doing anything on the practice side at all because they can't clearly articulate ROI. And it seems like, man, those firms are going to have a really hard time when clients start demanding this tech-enabled legal service delivery model, and they're still figuring out their strategy. So I don't know. That's what it feels like to me.
I think especially where AI is concerned, I think we're all still trying to figure out the ROI, right? You're investing a lot, dollars wise, perhaps time wise, hopefully for sure. But if you don't, kind of take an R&D-esque mindset, right, that you're going to have some misses, right? But you've got to have you'll find some hits, right? You'll have, and then you figure out as it matures, as it gets better than today, you're ready to have that ROI talk and really have an opportunity to say, hey, we're differentiating this way, or we're ahead of market, or whatever that is. But to say, I don't know, I'm going to wait, I think that's a risky bet.
Totally. I completely agree. And yeah, and like I beat this drum a lot, and it's not because I'm trying to be critical. It's because our livelihood is tied to the law firm market. And I really want to see firms push forward and be successful with this. So yeah, I hope I'm not being taken as a critic or a skeptic, but I just see the writing on the wall, and it feels like there's going to be a shift in market share from firms that have, like you said, invested in the R&D and worried less about ROI today, but looking at the future. Like, we have to learn. This is a learning exercise for us, and we're going to figure it out. And when we do, there'll be gold at the end of the rainbow. But the folks that wait, I'm concerned that the market will have changed in a way that they can't accommodate and deliver services the way the market needs because they're so far behind. That's what it feels like.
I agree. I will talk about it some as like a crawl, walk, run, right? And we're still crawling, likely, right? Getting to walking. But I mean, you can't start running without the other steps.
Right. Yeah, it's a very good point. Well, one of the benefits that I think is a first time thing in the legal world, in the Intranet Extranet world, is we're bringing both Intranet and Extranet together into one unified platform that we call unified collaboration. And you've been on board with this vision with us, and it's great to have you guys helping us figure this out. As by the time this airs, Extranet will be fully launched, which we're super excited about. But like, from your perspective, from our perspective, and we're not a law firm, but it just seems to make a lot of sense to have one interface and technology to learn to manage all collaborations, whether it's internal or external. Because at the end of the day, an intranet or an extranet is a comms mechanism. It's a way to communicate, but whether it's internally or externally, and sharing of content, whether that content is documents or docket information or billing or matter information, it's comms. And having one system to manage your comms, internal and external, feels like it makes a lot of sense. And how big a deal is having one instead of having a high queue and a handshake environment with built on different technologies and requiring different people to manage and different infrastructure and different licensing, and how big a deal is that in your world?
I think it's significant. I think from an end user, and I hate to use that word, from a usability perspective, right? You get to reinforce a common experience, and folks aren't context switching all the time, right? This is an intranet, this is extranet, this is Teams, or what, like for collaboration, like Matterwork or whatever. You get to be a little bit more consistent and hopefully deliver up key information, whether it's from your HR system or, BI tool, whatever it is, right? Those other systems deliver up the key information in a unified experience, right? Just reduce that effort people have to go through to get what they need, right? And I think, and so that's true for us, for the law firms. And then if you think about it from a client perspective, and knowing how many clients are familiar with Microsoft, it's reducing that load for them as well. I think Teams is an interesting piece of this. And I know we talked about this a ton when we were drafting our chapter, because as much as I would like to say that we have a lot of people using Teams sites for where they do work, we're not there yet.
Yeah, that's a crawl, walk, run journey too. So
Sure.
Crawl is presence, chat, and online meetings. That's the definition of crawl, and it's real easy to start crawling. Walking is when you start leveraging, retention policies around when you get a little more formal in how you're structuring your communications, because the beauty and the curse of Teams is its flexibility, right? There's a bunch of different places where you can collaborate, right? Are you going to post in channels? Or are you going to go post in chats? Are you going to have naming conventions? When do you post in chats versus channels? It's we're still figuring that out internally, and we live and breathe this stuff. So
yeah, we tend to have more operations teams, like business professionals, using Teams as a place to work, right? Like having team sites, documents are there, maybe it's attached to planner or project or, that type of thing. I think the lawyers are still largely, I manage email. But we're getting some to shift, and it's fun. I mean, that's a nerdy way to say it, but it's fun to watch them, to see them embrace Teams, right? To have all of their matter centric communication happening in posts, right? It's not in email. People get added to the matter. They can get caught up. We have M365 Copilot for folks. So there's that capability. I know you're a little bit of a critic, and that's fine. It's going to get better. And I think you said that, right? So when you start layering these things, these capabilities together, it becomes a compelling story. But I don't think it's something we're going to be able to, I want to say, force people into. But we can encourage them, coach them, meet them where they are.
Yeah. I just realized we keep talking about this chapter we wrote. We didn't name the book. So it's current and future trends in knowledge management and innovation for legal professionals. It's quite the mouthful. And Patrick DiDomenico pulled this together, and it's a great book, and it's an easy read. So for those of you who want to hear more about this topic, Katrina and I wrote a chapter that I think turned out pretty good. So
just ask us, we'll tell you.
Right, exactly. Well, something along the Teams lines that I think is worth talking about in collaboration. So the presence and the pervasiveness of presence indicators within the M365 suite is so incredibly cool. You can be working on a Word document and see an icon with a presence ring around it with anybody who happens to have the document open. And you can click on it and say, hey, I'm thinking about, and start co-authoring right there. I mean, and now I don't know what your plans are on this. It's, but B2B sharing, where you can enable shared channels. So in order to do shared channels in Teams today, and I think this is not going to change. It kind of has to stay this way, but it could get a little easier. There's like a 13-step process the last time I looked to enable B2B sharing, that you have to go in. IT has to do this. And they have to go in, and you have to basically accept the policy choices of your counterpart of this other domain who you're sharing information with. You accept all that. And then once you do, you can share channels, and then your attorneys can share content with them directly. If you use a tool like ours, every time you upload a document into a extranet site, let's say, and your clients are subscribed to that channel, they can get a notification in line with all their native Teams notifications. It doesn't muddy up their email box with all of that. Are y'all thinking about heading that direction?
We've talked about it. We are not pushing the conversation yet. Like, let's make sure we're good on the base capabilities.
Yeah.
And depending on like who the client is and how much collaboration we're doing with them, I think we would explore that. It is not on my immediate to-do list. But I have to say, okay, so speaking of to do, I was co-authoring or co-editing a document with a colleague, and in the comments, right, he assigned me a task, right? So it showed up in my task list, in my to-do, and I was like, oh my God, I kind of love that. I am the type of person that would put something on a list to cross it off, right? So to me, getting that type of notification, not just somebody mentioned you, right? But this is a task to do. And then he got the notification that I completed it. Like, that's kind of, I mean, I know it seems like, I don't say a weird thing, but absent that, how many emails back and forth could that have been?
100%. And it's so easy for things to get lost in email, you know? I mean, the way
Yeah.
I manage email, I don't know if it's ideal or not, but I keep things unread that are still pending. And when I need to follow up on things, I create a task with a date as a reminder.
Yeah.
But, you know, that is a very cool capability. How about one thing I think is an interesting use case, but I don't know how lawyers are going to feel about it, is once you enable B2B sharing, your clients can now ping you on Teams, right? That seems good and bad, right? Like, all right, you get a pop up. How quickly do you respond? You know, if you're a lawyer, and are you going to get heat if you don't respond in a timely manner? It could be disruptive. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on whether or not this is going to be a feature lawyers want to use with their
I don't know.
clients?
I remember this story. I mean, this is probably a decade at least old, that a law, and I want to say it was like an Australian law firm, that they had, through their website, their public facing website, showed the presence indicator like on their attorney bio pages. And that was the thing. It was like, do you really want to show that somebody's available now? Because I will also say that, and like as a business professional, I kind of like live and die by my calendar. You're probably the same way. You just have so many meetings and whatnot. I think for many lawyers, I mean, not to say that they're not over meetinged as well, they work on things, right? They're like in blocks of time, right? Working on something, but they may not have it reflected on their calendar, right? And I think it would be bad to like interrupt that like flow work, right? Just all the time. I mean, it could happen in email, but they've got a deadline. They can turn off email. But that persistent Teams pinging, I guess you could exit out of Teams, but that could be a challenge.
Yeah, it's Teams is email is much more asynchronous. Teams is more synchronous.
The other thing too, if you start, and it goes back to your governance topic, right? If you're allowing a client, you know, in that way, you probably want to capture those chats, right?
Yeah.
Like internally, if we're just, I mean, it depends on your organization, but depending on, like, if you're just using chats, you may have a rule to say they expire in 30 days or something like that. And if you're allowing clients to have that same experience with you, you probably don't want to expire them.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, I've heard of much more aggressive retention policies, like 3 days. The longest that I've ever heard for a chat is 7 days retention, and the reason is they want people to post in channels related to matters. And you know, a chat is, hey, you want to go grab coffee, right? Not, hey, so and so from such and such client wants to do X, Y, and Z with this matter. That needs to go in a channel. So the long, maybe it's 14 days, but I presented with a couple of firms at ILTA I don't know if it was last year or the year before, and they discussed their retention policies, and one was 3 days because of that reason.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe lawyers are going to have to adjust how they work and block time on their calendar. I know it's a crazy thing to think about, right? But if you're Coca-Cola and you have tens of millions of dollars of legal spend with a particular law firm, you're gonna ask for, hey, I'd like to ping you directly, and the lawyer's gonna say yes. I would think
they're gonna say cheers.
Right.
Sorry. That problem.
So in addition to the teams and the more frictionless sharing of information with clients, there's some other benefits that I want to get your thoughts on that I see from a product perspective. But with HiQ, that is a very ring-fenced, isolated system. It's on an island, and you want to push data in and out. You're pushing it into iSheets, which is like an Excel doc, or
SharePoint list.
I guess SharePoint list, right? Not a relational database. There are limitations to it. But now with our solution, we deploy in your tenant, so you can pull information from any, and we already stand up our integration hub that allows you
connector framework.
Yeah, exactly. So you can pull information from your PMS, docketing, experience management, LPM system, DMS, PMS,
whatever it is,
anything. Yeah. Do you guys have But historically, like, all those capabilities are super cool, but most law firms it's mostly files. Are you guys thinking you're going to do more now that it's easily accessible?
So, I mean, I think the files piece is certainly the use case that is the strongest. I think there are ways to better leverage, even if it's just the Microsoft list, right? Capability. I think there is some option to do some true, so we call it collaboration, right? But a lot of times that just means I'm going to upload some files so you have access to them. But I think you could have like the next level of collaboration, which includes like co-editing, right? Let's work on this document at the same time. I mean, imagine the savings you could have under the right scenario, right? Of I have my version, you have yours, and now we've got to exchange and redline and, right? I mean, that co-editing experience could just save so much time. And again, I think it depends on what is the relationship. If Coca-Cola, for example, I used to use big client, right? If a client like that said, we want to see our like billing history or WIP or whatever, if the business says that's appropriate, we now have an easier mechanism to do that. I think that in the HiQ world, and this is just our instance of HiQ, we would likely run reports and upload them.
Yeah.
As opposed to doing the data connector to an iSheet or to a SQL database or something like that and presenting it in the site, it would just likely be a more manual process. But I think that gets to be just a whole lot simpler. You're just removing so much friction.
Yeah. And I mean, HiQ was designed to that way. Like it's an island. And, they started when the cloud was still like scary, and, you kind of had to, people got uncomfortable if it was too easy to share. Right. I feel like we've come a long way since then, though. And now people do understand that it's okay. The cloud's not going to hurt you.
I mean, I think there was a movement, and maybe it's still in play, of being cloud first.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I mean, you mentioned earlier, there's still a lot of firms that are largely on-prem, but those numbers have to be dwindling. Not that this is my responsibility or remit, but I much prefer being able to think about how we deliver solutions than how do we keep like so many physical devices up and running and right and having to build infrastructure to support things to just be able to jump to supporting things.
Right. What about skill sets? So,
Yes.
like it seems so of the firms I know who have made significant high Q investments, many of them have teams who manage that, who have to really understand the platform. And with M365, if you understand M365 and SharePoint, and if you're a developer, they're fairly commodity skill sets, React.js, you know, a little SPFX, but you can build customizations. How much benefit are you going to get from just having more people who are easier to find, I would think?
I would say people that are easier to find, and also organizations that are able to support you, like from a consulting perspective, right? I mean, the high Q kind of ecosystem, I can count on one hand the consultants that I would go to if I really needed something bespoke out of high Q.
Yeah. It's unlimited.
They're good.
Yeah.
They're good, but limited.
Yeah. There's fewer of them. And, that means that drives up cost. That sometimes can, if they're busy, make things take longer.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely gives you more choice when it's just more of a commodity skill set. What about on the AI front? And I know we only have about 3-4 minutes here, but like you and I have talked about potential use cases with AI in the extranet world, like chatbots. Like we deployed, I think I can talk about this one because we did a case study on it, so it's public. We had a large IP firm who we built a chatbot on top of Azure OpenAI, and it crawled and indexed all of their policy documents. So expense policy that was in a PDF somewhere in a SharePoint library, a PTO policy that was on a wiki somewhere. It could be, sexual harassment policy, or, ethical gift limit policies that's in all these different places. And we took Azure AI and crawled and indexed all that. And we put Azure AI search to crawl and index, and then Azure OpenAI and build a bot where you can go in and ask any policy question in the intranet. And man, they love it. It's like, where do I go to submit a PTO request? Well, type it and you answer. Like, are there any client facing scenarios like that make sense?
I mean, I think that there can be. I mean, in that example, I think there are firms, right, if they have consistent advice, right, that they are giving people that experience, I think is huge, right? And if you think about kind of like the evolution of like intranet or whatever, it was maybe you would think about the menu structure and browsing, right, to find information, and then it was search. Now it's going to be chat.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the same thing maybe could be true with extranets. I mean, the browsing is probably less of an issue because it's focused on a topic, but the interrogation piece, right? Like, I think the sky's the limit, right? Imagine having like a co-pilot agent against a document library, right? Just to be able to do that what did we say about X, or, what has been filed about something, as opposed to largely being restricted by file name metadata.
Yeah.
And folder structure.
Yeah. And I hear a lot of people who are confused talk about, well, we've had natural language search for years. Oh, okay. Yeah, you have. And what do you get back with natural language search? You get back a list of links, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And what's different here is this is going to be a Perplexity-like interface where within documents, you get back answers, not just links to the documents where you got to go find it.
And it's semantic understanding, right? It's not, even with natural language search, it's just not that good.
Yeah. Yeah. Enterprise search, and that's a whole nother topic.
So Ted, before, I know we're just have a minute or so left, but I do want to point out one thing about the extranets and in the Microsoft world, and that is site lifecycle. And that's been a pain point, I think, for a while. It's very easy to spin up sites. It's challenging to spin them down, and that's a risk, right? You want to remove people when they haven't been visiting, right? And you want to archive sites as a matter of policy when they haven't been used. And that's a capability that comes kind of in the Microsoft realm that has been missing, at least from my vantage point in the HiQ environment. Because I think it really is a risk and governance concern, and being able to close that gap is important.
Yeah. Well, if you think about their licensing model, does it make sense for them to provide capabilities that would reduce your storage or site footprint? Seems like there's maybe incentive to not make that so easy. But yeah, we have put a lot of effort into that. Because we deploy in your environment, we have 2 licensing models today. This is probably going to change. It's still brand new, but you can license by sites, or just like you guys did, just do it enterprise wide. And then there are no limitations. You can, as much storage as Microsoft gives you, which is like, if you're on an E3 or E5, I think it's like one terabyte per user, or something crazy. Like there's a lot of storage out there. And when you need to buy more, it's cheap. But yeah, we've put a lot of effort into the provisioning and the governance piece of this. Like, you can hover over a document and get a preview when we log it. So it is extremely detailed. And we think, that's one area where AI, we have some ideas about how to incorporate AI, asking analytics questions. Like, give me the top 5 sites that haven't been used in the last 30 days, or the top 3 users who have downloaded the most content, or you can do some really neat stuff on the analytics side.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's a nifty idea.
Yeah. And because we log everything in Azure App Insights, so it's really easy to query out, but it's manual if you do it through the interface. Crawl and index that stuff, throw a bot on top. You can ask some really neat questions. Yeah, all that stuff's coming down the pike. Well, this has been a great conversation, as always. I really appreciate you taking a few minutes. Are you active on LinkedIn?
I am.
Yeah. So folks can find you at Katrina Dittmer.
Indeed.
And that's Dittmer on LinkedIn. And you show your face at events. I see you in places here and there, right?
I will be at ILTA. I think I'm speaking at a session at ILTA. So we'll connect then.
Good stuff. All right. Well, thanks for spending some time. And I'm sure I'll see you before ILTA, but worst case, I'll see you then.
All right. Take care.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Legal Innovation Spotlight. If you found value in this chat, hit the subscribe button to be notified when we release new episodes. We'd also really appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate us and leave us a review wherever you're listening right now. Your feedback helps us provide you with top-notch content.